Hello and welcome to Mormon Postmortem. It's What Do You Know Wednesday. I'm your host, Jess.
And I'm Hannah.
Hey, Hannah. I know you know a little bit about this, but I want to ask, what do you know about baptism for the dead?
I know that we both did it as youth. You go and stand in as proxy for somebody and get baptized on their behalf with your physical body because they don't have the physical body to be baptized in anymore. So you're using records of people who really lived and taking their names and then enacting this ordinance on their behalf.
So, baptism for the dead, formally called proxy baptism, it's one of the most distinctive and controversial practices in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So, it was introduced by Joseph Smith, in 1840. Then there is a very, very small biblical anchor for this. It's just one verse in 1 Corinthians 15:29. Really the only reference to baptism for the dead in the entire Bible, and it offers no explanation for the practice. So Christian commenters have been divided on what the Corinthians were actually doing since the text was written. But the LDS Church saw that as an endorsement, even though other Christian traditions do not. So, as Hannah mentioned, it is you're being baptized, your physical body is baptized by proxy for someone who is deceased. Now, because the LDS Church has the biggest genealogical database in the world, you would think, well, members are just performing ordinances for their own ancestors or for millions of others that they've identified through this mass name extraction program. They've gone through hundreds of thousands of historical records. But Hannah, this is the second question I have for you. Who are some of the most famous, also known as celebrities, who you think have been baptized for the dead?
Let's see. I mean, I think I mentioned a while ago, I think sent you a text and said, I bet they baptized Anne Frank for the dead. And you may have responded, yeah, several times.
Several times. Yeah. So the first public splash was in 1841 at a 4th of July celebration in Nauvoo. It included the public proxy baptisms for these deceased national heroes, including George Washington, the Frenchman Lafayette, and President William Henry Harrison, who had just died in April. Now, national newspapers noticed, but it established a pattern, and the church kept doing it. So, in the St. George Temple in Utah on August 21st, 1877, church president Wilford Woodruff oversaw proxy baptisms for all of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, for Christopher Columbus, and let me tell you, that SOB sure didn't deserve it, John Wesley, and dozens of other European statesmen, scientists, poets, and military leaders.
Because,
Between
of course, they would have wanted to be baptized if they had had the opportunity.
Oh, of course.
And they knew that.
And they to be absolved of all of their sins of genocide and sexual slave trade. But
Makes sense. I mean, they had a
makes
lot to
sense.
repent for.
Mhm. Then between August 22nd and 23rd in 1877, so that same year, all the remaining U.S. presidents received proxy baptisms except James Buchanan, Martin Van Buren, and Ulysses S. Grant.
Because they are
So Grant
enemies of the church.
Actually, it was because Grant was still alive.
Okay.
And then Woodruff he declined to perform the work for Buchanan and Van Buren because of their actions against the saints during their administrations.
What a
So
dick.
I know he's withholding it for a personal grudge.
What a dick.
But both were eventually baptized decades later. Buchanan in the Salt Lake Temple in 1932 and Van Buren in 1938.
I was worried for their salvation for a minute.
I'm sure you were.
Thank God.
So
I
we're
hope
gonna
they
move.
accept it. Because, of course,
Well,
you still have free
you
will,
still
right?
have the right to
You
say
still
I
have
don't.
choice. Yeah.
Right.
You don't have to accept it. You could be
But
a fence
let's
sitter.
look globally. This is where I had to start spinning, to be honest. So In 1993, Adolf Hitler was baptized and endowed by proxy on December 10th,
Who did that?
1993. He was sealed to his parents on March 12th, 1994.
Who?
All of it
Where?
happened in the
Why?
London, England LDS temple. It's your folks are doing this, not your parents in
No,
particular, but
probably was literally my parents.
it's those Brits.
Wow. Okay.
So when
Wow.
when the records were discovered and publicized, the church leadership just expressed some embarrassment, but they didn't take it back.
They were like, "You're not supposed to see that."
And a lot of you'll hear folks say, like, that Vlad the Impaler was baptized for the dead, and his name does appear in some popular summaries of controversial proxy baptisms. But I looked at the primary sources, and I looked, and that includes the Mormonism Research Ministry's documented list, and I couldn't independently confirm it. So may have happened. I'm not quite sure.
How does anybody find out any of this stuff? Like,
Well,
how did
that's the biggest place, or the first place to go look, is the Mormonism Research Ministry's documented list.
I'm surprised they publish it.
It's a primary source. So to your Anne Frank point earlier, this is the most sustained controversy that the LDS Church has with its proxy baptisms. Jewish victims of the Holocaust started appearing in LDS proxy baptism records in significant numbers in the 1990s. Over the years, the church has performed the ceremony for approximately 650,000 Holocaust victims. So Jewish leaders began formally objecting in 1992. In 1995, after multiple meetings with Jewish leaders, the church agreed, okay, we'll stop baptizing Holocaust victims. But the agreements kept breaking down. Church leadership removed names from databases and they issued guidelines, but individual members kept submitting them anyway. And yes, Anne Frank, most cited case. Through the
Fire.
research I found, she is believed to have been baptized by proxy at least 9 times, despite repeated arguments with Jewish organizations to stop.
Stop,
Well,
Mormons.
no, listen, there's one more. In
Freaking.
January 2012, the parents of Nazi hunter Simon Wiesenthal were posthumously baptized at LDS temples in Arizona and Utah.
Who is doing this?
I mean, later church officials apologized, but they were without shame. But get this, here's a couple more modern ones. The day after Barack Obama secured enough delegates to win the Democratic presidential nomination, someone had his late mother, Stanley Ann Dunham, who died in 1995, baptized by proxy. And on June 11th, she received the endowment ceremony as well.
So whoever it is, they've got their eye on current happenings, right? Nobody really knew Obama's name so much at that point, right?
Right. But they're like, oh,
He was
dibs, we got this one.
he was an up and comer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But someone was like, they are on the ball.
Yeah. And I couldn't find anything about if he knows, if he has an opinion. But that would be certainly something really interesting to keep digging for.
Is his father still alive?
I read his book and I can't recall.
Me either. Okay, something to consider.
I don't believe
If
so.
his
But
dad is alive and they didn't baptize him, I would be
Hannah, he's
curious. I know.
African.
I know. I'm just saying. Oh, that's silly of me to go there, though, because it's not like the church has a history of racist policies and
No,
practices
not at
and
all. Never.
attitudes and values and members. So I apologize. That is mere speculation.
Okay, my last one that I personally was so offended by this because I remember watching all of the news. I did not watch the whole video, but I saw like the beginning of this video. So Daniel Pearl, he was the Wall Street Journal reporter who was kidnapped and killed by terrorists in Pakistan in 2002. NPR independently confirmed a proxy baptism performed for him on June 1st, 2011, at the LDS Temple in Twin Falls, Idaho. Posthumous rites involving Pearl were later found at 2 other temples in Idaho and one in Utah. His widow, Marianne, called it, quote, "a lack of respect for Danny and a lack of respect for his parents," end quote. So that's a lot of famous, infamous, you name it, people that the church members keep putting forward who they are baptizing without family consent, without any rhyme or reason or logic as to why certain people should be included in those roles. But they're being repeatedly baptized for the dead. So church leadership consistently frames the controversial baptisms as it's just the work of individual members acting against official policy and not under institutional direction. I don't know how I feel about that. The church stated in 2012 that it takes, and I'm quoting, a good deal of deception and manipulation to get an improper submission through the safeguards we have put in place.
Sounds like it.
Quote. Yeah. And that it was absolutely firm in its commitment to not accept Holocaust victims' names. Yeah, after 650,000 got through.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
It would be
critics
interesting to test that tight
now,
process,
right.
right?
Critics point to the 20 years of repeated violations despite repeated commitments, and Jewish community leaders have argued that the church's genealogical apparatus, which they've described as among the most sophisticated in the world, should be capable of monitoring this if the institution actually prioritized it. The deeper Jewish connection isn't theological. Daniel Pearl was kidnapped and killed because he was Jewish. Simon Weissenthal's parents were murdered because they were Jewish. The ceremony, whatever the church believes it accomplishes, reassigns the religious identity of people who paid for that identity with their lives. So that's it.
Tone deaf and disrespectful.
Yep. And that's what I've got for this What Do You Know Wednesday.
Well, I am more enlightened. I know more than I did before, and I'm not grateful.
I'm sorry.
And now I've got
Sorry to
some
rain
stuff.
on your Wednesday.
Yeah, I got some stuff to think about now. Well, I appreciate that, Jess.
All right, Hannah, what's on the docket for next What Do You Know Wednesday?
Next Wednesday, we are going to be asking, what do you know about Mormon influencers?
Ooh, that sounds like a great one.
It
I guess we'll
is
see you next week.
a can of worms. Before we go, I just want to say, Jess, I am sorry for what I said when I was Mormon.
Hannah, me too. I'm so sorry for what I said when I was Mormon.